Hey, welcome to Gold's Garage. So, a couple days ago, I made a video about how to run high compression with pump gas, and if you're going to do that, how to manage it. And got lots of response to it. As usual, I missed a couple points, and there's lots of questions on my channel. I do my best to answer every question I can. But I thought I'd make this video. It'll cover off a whole bunch of those questions. Because if someone's asking that question, probably a lot of other people are thinking about it also. So I'm going to try and do that and cover off some points. And as usual, I got some new stuff for you too. So the issue was how high compression can you run? And if you're going to run it, how do you manage it? And probably be helpful if you're going to watch this video. If you go back the previous one to it, watch that as well. Both will make more sense if you watch them together. So the first thing that I missed was Quench. It's really important. Somebody wrote, more than one person gave me a comment or a question. You know, what about Quench? Isn't that important? Yes, it is. I apologize. I just missed it. If you look at the screenshot in that video, I had a bullet about Quench, but I failed to address it. I just missed it. That's all. So we're going to fix that right now. So quickly, what is quench height is important. So quench height is the distance from the top of your piston to the bottom of your cylinder head. And why is that important? It's important because when your fuel and air mixture comes into the cylinder, it's not homogeneously mixed. You got droplets of fuel that are not atomized. And so what quench does, when the piston comes close to the head, some people use the term squish. It forces that fuel and air mixture out into the combustion chamber and helps it to mix homogeneously. So when it's ignited, it fires off all at once. If you have pockets of combustion because you've got a lean mixture and a rich mixture and they fire at different times, that's when those two wavelengths get together and do damage, called pre-ignition or knock. And that's what you don't want to have happen. Detonation is the term. So quench height, once again, is basically the thickness of your head gasket plus the distance your piston is down the hole or from the surface of your block. So the ideal quench height, and I'm doing this based on research and passed on and knowledge that I have. There are other points of view on it. The number I'm going to give you is 40 thousandths of an inch to 45 thousandths of an inch. I've got comments on my channel from people who say they've run less than that, down to 35 thou or so, and I'm sure they have. But as usual, I'm being conservative. Ideally, the closer it is, the better, until your piston hits the head, and then that's game over. So you don't want that to happen, and that's why you have to have a gap to allow for expansion, stretch, a whole bunch of other things that can happen. So that's the number I'm going to give you. And just to give you an example, on the Pontiac block, we actually decked this block. When we took it apart, it had over 60 thousandths of an inch quench. We took 18 thousandths of an inch off the deck surface, and we've now got that quench right down to right around 45 thousandths of an inch, plus or minus 1,000. So that's ideal. Now, there's more to it than that. It's important that even if you have that distance, that you have a flat spot on your piston and a flat spot on your head that come together. Flat top pistons work. That's one of the reasons that they work good. Combustion chamber volume is a factor. An open chamber head doesn't work as well as a closed chamber head because it doesn't have a good quench surface on it. So there's a lot more to know about it. So I'm going to make a suggestion. There's a YouTube channel out there, Ben Alameda Racing. And Ben is a Ford guy. We like him anyways. But Ben is a very successful drag racer and engine builder. And I found his channel kind of researching for this video. Ben's got a deep, strong understanding of quench, and he's got lots of great visual aids to help explain quench. So if you want to take a deep dive into understanding quench and why it's important, check out Ben's YouTube channel, and I think you're going to find that helpful. So Any more questions? Get back to me on that one. So the next thing is determining dynamic compression. One of the things, by the way, I'm going to refer to my notes here, and Mike's going to put a screenshot of these notes in the video so that you will have the same information that I have. But I'm doing this so I don't forget anything. So calculating dynamic compression. So one of the points I made in the last video is before you even start, you need to know your dynamic compression, your static compression first, then dynamic compression, and your calculated compression pressure, cranking pressure that you get with a compression gauge. And lots of questions about that, guys questioning. He did the calculation and the dynamic pressure is coming out at 220 psi. Here's a really important point. When you're calculating dynamic compression and cranking pressure, use your advertised numbers, not your at 50 numbers for specifications for your camshaft. So typically, if you're in the 10 to 11 to 1 compression ratio and you got a hot streak cam, you should have an intake closing valve point of somewhere around 60 to 70 degrees. So if you're doing the calculation and you're using 30 or 35 degrees, you're probably using the wrong number. Do not use the at 50 number for this calculation. Remember, nothing's being compressed until the valve's completely closed. And if you're using the at 50 number, the valve's not completely closed. So remember that, and quite a few questions. That'll cover off quite a few questions. So the next one, why use higher compression in the first place? I think I kind of covered that in the past, but what it really does is increases thermal efficiency. So in the process of an engine converts chemical energy, which is in the fuel, to mechanical energy. On the way, it converts it to heat energy. So when the fuel air mixture is ignited, that turns into heat. Heat creates expansion. Expansion pushes down on your piston, and that's how you get mechanical energy. So it follows the reason that the more you have, the better it'll be. So that's why we want higher compression. So taking that into consideration, just to give you an idea, we talk about cranking pressure of 180 psi. Once you have combustion in the cylinder, it's probably over 1,000 psi, 1,200 psi. So the area of a 4-inch piston is about 12 square inches. So if you multiply that 12 square inches by 12 square inches by 1,000 psi, it's 12,000 pounds, which is 6 tons of force pushing that piston down. So that's converting chemical energy into heat energy and then into mechanical energy. And that's how it gets to your rear wheels. So why use the intake? One of the other questions that I got was, why use a late intake valve closing point to reduce compression? Don't we want to increase compression? And that's a really good question. So here's the point. We use a late intake valve closing point, usually 60 to 70 degrees. And so the piston, if you have a 4-inch stroke, your piston's probably about 1 inch up the cylinder bore before the valve gets closed. And so instead of compressing fuel and air mixture for that first 1 inch, it's pushing it back into the intake manifold. It's mixing with the fuel and air mixture from the other cylinders, and diluting your exhaust mixture and creating havoc. That's why camshaft with large duration sounds so cool, because they're very, very inefficient at low speed. So that's what happens at low speed. But at high speed, it's a different story. Fuel and air mixture has weight, has mass. Anything that has mass has inertia. So if you watched my video that we made at Bill Little's shop when he was on the flow bench, he was measuring the velocity of fuel and air mixture going past the intake valve when he was doing the flow test. And it was well over 300 feet per second. And that's well over 200 miles an hour. So the fuel and air mixture is coming in from your intake manifold, hitting the back of your valve. Because it has inertia, when the valve closes, it stacks up pressure against the intake valve. The intake valve opens and it's rushing. It's almost like supercharging your cylinder. So what creates inefficiency at low speed, because the fuel and air mixture doesn't have any velocity, it's easy for the piston to push it back up into the intake manifold. At high speed, it has velocity, it has inertia, it wants to get in that cylinder, and that's how it fills the cylinder. Now, Bill brought up a good point. Somebody asked a question related to the previous video, and Bill brought up a point. There's another factor in here we talk about. He talks about volumetric efficiency. So what I stated in the last video was that detonation is a bigger problem at low speed because of the fact that the detonation wave has a lot more time to do its damage when the piston is traveling at low speed, and therefore managing it in the ways I already mentioned. However, real efficient race engines have fuel volumetric efficiencies greater than 100%. So they, in fact, can be creating a little bit of detonation at high speed that you don't know about, you won't hear at high speed, probably, especially if you have an open header. And that's a concern as well. So the next question is on compression ratio. Why not keep going higher? Where someone asked, I made the point last time that there's an item called diminishing returns. As I said, if you go from 8 to 9 compression ratio, you gain something. 9 to 10, you gain something. As you go up, you gain less. 10 to 11 is less, and so on. And so why is that? So a couple of reasons for that. First of all, there's a parasitic loss. It takes power, horsepower, and torque to compress that fuel and air mixture. So remember, in an 8-cylinder engine, only one piston is firing at a time. The rest are resisting rotation, they're resisting acceleration. Some are being compressed, so some of that power is being used to compress the other cylinder. So that's one of the factors. And the other one is this. If you have, let's say you have 400 cubic inches, 8 cylinders, 50 cubic inches a cylinder. So let's assume the cylinder is 50 cubic inches, and you keep increasing the compression ratio. You do that by reducing the volume at the top, which is reducing the volume of combustion chamber volume or whatever. So you're actually reducing the volume that is a fuel and air mixture that's allowed into that cylinder for each intake stroke. So as you get higher and higher, as that combustion chamber volume gets smaller, less and less fuel and air mixture is getting in there. And that is taking away from the gains you're getting by having high compression. I have found some graphs. If you do some research on it, there's some graphs out there of graphing horsepower versus compression ratio. And it's kind of a rollover curve at high end. It starts to roll over a little bit. And I'm not sure exactly where the limitation is. Probably the real limitation in practical fact is how high compression you can use and not have detonation for an internal combustion engine. Now, if it's a diesel, it's the opposite situation. Diesels love spontaneous combustion. That's how they fire off, right? They don't have spark plugs. So diesels can be 18 to 20, higher than that compression ratio, as long as the block and the heads are strong enough to take those kind of pressures. But for an internal combustion engine, 12, 13 to 1 seems like the practical limit even for a race car. But the limitation really, once again, is caused by the two factors that I mentioned. So another question was, somebody asked, if you have high compression, you can do a bunch of things. You can back off your timing. I mentioned backing it off from, as I said, when we were on the dyno, we might make the best power at 38 degrees, and it's only a couple of horsepower less at 34. So why not just back it off a couple degrees? Your engine will like it, and you won't notice the difference. So how far do you want to go with that? There's a question on the channel. What if I have to back it off to 26 or 28 degrees? Well, you have to ask yourself, if you have to do all those things to compensate for high compression, backing your timing off to 26 to 28 definitely will hurt your power. 38 to 34 probably won't hurt much, but 38 to 28 will hurt for sure. If you have to go that far, probably You went too far, and you have to ask yourself, whether it's worth it. Because let's remember something. We're doing this to have fun, guys and girls. And if your hot rod's creating more stress than it's creating pleasure, if you got to worry about all these things, it's not going to be that much fun to drive. I try to build engines that a buyer can put it in the car, turn the key, drive it like any other engine, have some fun, make some power, and not have to be worrying about it all the time. And that's how I think about it. And if you got to do a whole bunch of things to compensate for trying to squeeze that last couple of horsepower out, whether it's worth the trouble. Now, if you're racing, you need every last horsepower that you can get. That's the price you have to pay. So I'll close off with a term that my good buddy Dave Seabrook coined a long time ago. You don't drive a hot rod, you manage it. And that's kind of what I tried to say last time. If you're going to do all these things, it's not like your fuel injected car that's got a computer on it. You just push the button and go. You got to manage it when you're driving it. So keep that in mind. Have fun driving. Enjoy your ride. Please like and subscribe. And let me know if you have any more questions.